The following podcast may contain discussions supported by science that may be considered dangerous to some listeners and conspiracy theorists. Discretion is advised.
The Three Down Greencast is brought to you by Lucky Bastard Distillers, Saskatchewan's premier distillery, and by the Pile of Bones Brewing Company, brewed in the heart of Regina. Welcome to the Three Down Greencast. You are listening to the internet's only sheep and sports podcast. I am Joel Gasson with John Fraser as usual. Plenty to get to as the Riders play a pretty good game, I would say, against the Montreal Alouettes, but come up just a bit short. So we will talk about that game, which is, of course, we'll talk a little bit about the kicking situation with Brett Lauther, the play of Trevor Harris, and more. But
first,
it was...
We've got to start with the dumb from your art. As we usually we wait till like 3/4 of the way through the pod to mention, your article on Three Down Nation. But this time, as we maybe should consider doing, we're going to bat lead off with something you brought up in your excellently written piece for Three Down Nation.
Maybe. Depends on what the game delivers or not. So as you will recall, it was Prairie Proud Night. Friday night at Mosaic Stadium for the game between the Riders and the Owls, which really was just a fancy way of saying country night.
Right.
But without the sort of mockery of always, like, rewind a little bit. Every country night they've ever done, by the fourth quarter, there is no country music. It's always actual songs that get people pumped up for sporting events.
Well, it's like how the Rush finally broke their basically 10-season-long country night curse in Saskatchewan last year. Mm-hmm. They had never won on country night because a game that involves lots of music, lots of things to get players and people pumped up, who would have thought that bringing it down for country music, would maybe lead to some losses. And so you're right. It just seems like it's one of those things. You call it country night, you're obliged to play that stuff, and you end up taking the L.
Anyway, so just like last year, they had basically a kids' rodeo at halftime. You will recall last year it gave us the infamous moment where a sheep escaped the pen they created.
Yes.
And was all over the field. It ran all the way down one way, all the way back the other way. It became a great viral moment for the team and the league. The team even embraced it for the rest of the year, using, sheep in some imagery a few more times. It was great. It was fantastic. Handled well. The whole thing was fantastic. That did not happen this year, unfortunately. And maybe that's why the Riders lost the game. Who knows? They did not have the magic of the sheep getting on the field. And we were talking about it, watching as this was going on. They definitely had the fence a lot longer this year. It went from like the wall to the video board on the field on the other side that plays the ads.
Right.
But I was like, well, I mean, the sheep still technically probably could have gone around the ad board and all the way up the field. But I mean, that would have been quite the jaunt. They did not figure that one out, nor did the sheep really get that far, because the kid rodeo happened, the kids were riding them, and I would say 60 to 75% of the kids didn't seem that into it. They were either...
Which is surprising, because you'd think you'd bring out kids that were normally into the mutton busting, as they call it.
I don't know. I don't know if there's if the parents, sort of forced this upon their kids, or if the kids were wanting to do it and it didn't, because who knows, kids are fickle. It could have gone either way. But anyways, some of them were just not into it from the start. Some of them kind of looked okay and then were sad and crying when they got knocked off. Most of them fell off like instantly. I think one little girl actually made a pretty good loop around sort of for a little bit. So beyond that, it was pretty much a disaster. It did not go well, and
can be.
It fell pretty flat in the stands. I think you could tell there was, especially people who were parents watching this, being like, This is awkward.
Yeah, because we've all been there where your kid doesn't want to do something and there's tears and they see the crowd and they're just like, they just shut down, right? As kids have been known to do.
Mm-hmm.
So at least, though, Joel, it didn't end up, they did the same thing for country night with the Saskatchewan Rush. And as I alluded to earlier, the Rush did break the country night curse, and I think I know why. I think I know the difference between halftime at Mosaic and halftime at SaskTel Center. Well, the sheep they had out there, the kids were enthusiastic. They seemed into it. It was actually quite entertaining. Not as good as the Super Dogs the one time, but it was pretty good. But the thing that they never thought of is, unlike, football turf where hypothetically sheep poop could hide. In fact, it would probably just look like one of those little black things that, are underneath the green turf. On the bright green neon surface of SaskTel Center and Co-op Field, the poop was very evident. Now, the funniest part was, this went on for about 12 minutes. It was 15-minute half times. Well, there was a large problem after the sheep left. There was poop everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm talking everywhere. Like, it was an all-hands-on-deck moment.
The riders were very prepared for it. They were pretty much cleaning the poop with like a broom or a shovel and a scoop instantly. As soon as there's poop on the field, they were on it. So.
The Rush had like one person doing that, but the amount of poop is what I don't think they were prepared for. Like, the entire ticketing, marketing, game day staff, if I was doing sidelines, I'm sure I would have been roped into it. In fact, I think Sabine Ahmad might have been helping them at one point. And then post game, we found out from the guy that scored the game-winning goal, it was a nice one of those vertical through-the-air goals. He's like, I don't know what I got on my jersey, but I don't think all the poop was gone. So therein lies the difference, right? Sheep poop, like bird poop allegedly, is apparently good luck, so maybe they just left a sprinkle on there. Maybe Brett Lauther could have turned it around in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, streaks are always good, I guess.
Streaks. Get it? Poop joke.
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't the worst poop we saw on the field in that game, obviously. We do have a lot to get into as the Riders lost their 4th of the season and the second row to the Montreal Alouettes. But as usual, before that, John, before we get into all that, for the Pile of Bones Brewing Company, what is in the glass this week?
There are going to be about 12 people, maybe 3 of them are listeners, that are surprised to hear this, that after and again, I will not talk about my fantasy football team, but I will tell you that we had my draft and golf tournament on the weekend, and it was a great time. So there are some people that'll still be shocked to learn that here we are 2 days later. I am back on the Gambit Gin from Lucky Bastard because I had a bottle of that go away on Saturday night.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. That was after I had a golf tournament all day. But I found, the Instagram algorithm must have known something was coming up.
Mm-hmm.
It found these magical anti-hangover pills that I tried. And again, some of my friends and family you're trying a random drug from the internet. And I'm like, there's like 1,000 good Amazon reviews, and like none of the bad reviews mention death or dying. So fuck it, let's give it a whirl. And they were a miracle, Joel Gasson. I tell you what. They were so good, I don't want to go on too much about them because I think they should pay us for the advertising, because if anybody knows a hangover after a 3-day drink fest, it is me. But yes, back on the Gambit Gin tonight with lime, guava juice, and ice.
In fairness, you didn't think you were prepared to record on Monday night like we could have, because you said you were still not quite there. So it wasn't obviously 100% effective.
No, it was more it's funny, like every day I woke up and I felt like a million bucks. Like I didn't feel like I'd been drinking, but the pills because obviously when you're drunk, you don't get REM sleep, right? So yeah. I'd basically not slept for 3 nights. So therein was the issue with that. I felt fine, although I did have a couple Bud Lights and my body was like, no, you shouldn't be more
I mean, that's a fair reaction.
Right, after all I've been through. But no,
even,
it was
even without being through it.
That's also fair. But it was more fatigue more than anything. These pills were wonderful. Now we'll let you know if I grow a third leg or third arm.
For me, because I did not put any beer in the fridge, I am having a Stooner. That's, of course, the Lucky Bastard Saskatoon Berry Iced Tea, 0 sugar. And when it's currently 31 degrees out still at 7:30 at night, it's an appreciated easy drinking beverage.
Oh yeah, 100%. This is one of those days that it's funny. Like I'm off this week with the kids. You're on parental leave right now, and I felt zero guilt of just hanging out inside because it's that frickin' hot outside.
Yeah, always. It got a little hot for Brett Lauther on Friday night, as he had, I'm gonna reckon, probably the worst game of his entire career.
I would agree.
I don't know. He may have missed 4 kicks in a game before, but probably none quite on that scale. because probably when he was, kicking out east in college or in high school, it wasn't as big of a deal.
Right.
So, I mean, there's two kinds of stories to this game. Obviously, the Riders lost to the Alouettes by 3 points, 27-24, and when your kicker misses 4 kicks, the obvious path to is they lost as well. The kicker didn't do his job. And I think beyond the shadow of a doubt, that is sort of the simplest way to describe what happened in that game. But there are some other things that we'll get into as well that maybe could have made some of, if not all of, Brett Lauther's kicks a little less important had some other things happen, because football is never a one-play thing. But in this case, it's very easy to sit here and say, yeah, he probably should have made at least 2 or 3 more of those kicks. And then they would have won that game.
No, you're bang on that. Especially too, it's not like the snap was bad. It's not like the hold was bad. It's not even like the weather was bad, right?
No,
like
there wasn't even really much of a reason there.
Yeah, you could get if a guy misses a couple kicks because he's on an old school like mud surface, or it's windy, or it's raining, or it's storming, or something, but. At home, at the field, you should not be missing those kicks unless maybe if either Korzak or Hughes was having an off night as well. And just quickly, as I was talking, I rifled through it. Dating back to 2018 when he was really full-time in the league, he has never missed more than 2 per game heading into this season. So, yeah, I would also agree. Probably the worst night of his kicking career. I will give him credit, though, for post-game.
Yep.
Meeting with the media and just saying, like, sharing his thoughts, being honest, being like, yeah, I feel like a liability. I feel like, everything else was good. The guys are going to try to wear it for me. But this was all on me, which is both good and bad because, to me, I enjoy a guy owning his mistakes and being honest and frank with the media and not just being a cliche monster, right? Like, That's why nobody talks to cliche Schaefer Baker after games. But on the same note, you're starting to worry, like, okay, is that where this guy's headspace is at? That, you're starting to think, I'm a liability, I'm this. Like, those thoughts are definitely going through your head every time you step on the field, and that's not what you need out of your kicker.
No.
And I get it, he's a fan favorite, big community guy, chugs beers after big wins, with the fans, but I think it's time that Jeremy O'Day needs to bring in somebody else. Not saying that you cut Brett Lauther and all ails are cured or anything like that, but I think he just needs a second guy there to maybe push him a little, and if the funk continues, you can give this other guy you bring in a game or two to kind of see where it goes from there.
Yeah, I mean, and to the point of him, like, he easily could have ducked out of that post-game because, like, Trevor Harris and Corey Mace were both at the podium before the doors opened, and he was still just sitting there. There was plenty of time for him to duck out, and he would have been, frankly, within his rights to do it. There's nothing that, other than the guys that got brought up to the podium, there's no obligation for anyone to stick around in the locker room after the game, no matter how well or bad or indifferent they played. So the fact that he sat there and said, no, I was waiting for you guys because I want to do this, that is a positive sign to me. Some of the things he said obviously are a little concerning, but you hope he was just kind of feeling emotional in the moment, and a lot of these professional athletes are able to put that sort of thing behind them within minutes, hours after a game, compared to, like, I mean, you're maybe the exception. You're the guy who gets mad at golf or curling, and 30 seconds later you're fine. Some of us kind of, our anger kind of hangs around a little bit longer than that sometimes, but I don't think there's any question that something has to be done here. I know there's been calls for him to straight up be cut. The CFL isn't that league. Like, This isn't the NFL where a guy misses 4 kicks and is, especially even as a long-time vet, isn't out the door the next day. Like, that just doesn't happen. I don't think that gets you anywhere.
No, of course it doesn't.
Because, I mean, Brett Lauther, as you said, he is a respected guy in the community, in the locker room. Like, he's a kicker, but he's also a team captain.
Yes.
He's one of the team captains, so obviously the guys in the room respect him, even though he's the kicker. So I think if there was sort of that hard of approach to just cut him now, I think that would disrupt the room a little bit.
Well, I would absolutely agree. And who's out there to replace him with?
Yeah. I mean, there's millions of kickers everywhere. Whether you find the good enough Canadian to keep the ratio as you are, I don't know. But yeah, but it is surprising to me that we sit here on Tuesday night, obviously this week, that they travel to Toronto tomorrow, they have walkthrough, and then they play Thursday. There's obviously not another kicker coming in this week. So I'm kind of surprised that wasn't done, because I agree. I think we were probably past the point, even because Brett Lauther now, I think even before this week, had maybe the second worst percentage of the league in terms of kickers. Now he has the worst at like 71.4, I believe.
You got it. Yep.
So that's a concerning spot to be, even though it's a 9-team league. Like, if you're last and still kicking 90%, you're like, well, everyone's just absurd, so whatever. But
right, exactly.
But you're last in at 71, which is like a good kicker number from 1960. That's concerning, because that's not going to work in modern professional football, period. So, I don't think you need to cut him yet. I think he still deserves to start against Toronto. But yeah, the other guy should have been here this week, and the leash should probably be shortening, if not pretty darn tight. If for some reason he has another outing like that in Toronto, then you're headed into Labor Day with, okay, you make the decision of, this is probably your last chance.
Right.
Before we make the switch, at least temporarily.
Well, and that's the thing, too, is like, I look at what so often happens, and again, back to my lacrosse experience, so often in a lacrosse game, where a goalie gets off to a bad start, they'll pull him and just sit him on the bench for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
They give the guy a minute or two to breathe, and then you see him sprint back in, usually while play is ongoing, right? Like, I don't feel like that cutting Brett Lauther is a good idea, but I don't hate the idea of bringing in a guy to just, like, to me, Brett Lauther has earned the respect and earned the chance to just go, if he has another rough week in Toronto, be like, hey, we're going to sit you down for a couple games.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to put you on the 1-game injured list. Like, we're not going to cut you. Like, he's got enough of a tenure, and I get it. There's hundreds of thousands of kickers out there that you could go find, but based on his track record, if he can even get back to near his career average, he's typically a top 5 kicker in the league, right? So I think he's earned enough runway to give him a game or two to figure it out.
Yeah, the leash is kind of short, though, because
I agree.
Things are tight. It's not like they're the Montreal Alouettes, who you have half a season to fuck around now if you want.
Right. Well, and the problem is, too, is like, you're in a spot now by not bringing in a guy this week. Are you really going to sit Brett Lauther down on Labor Day with a guy you just signed off the couch? Like, that's just...
Maybe. We've seen kickers come in on less and do fine.
No, that's fair. That's fair. But speaking of all this, like, looking at kicker numbers, like, how absurd are Sean White's numbers at 100%?
Yeah.
Like, that's just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And his team is still, falling way, way, way back. But I do think help needs to come in. I think competition is healthy.
Then there was a year, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, Lauther kind of went through the same thing. They did bring someone in. He never saw the field again, but he didn't see the field, but Lauther didn't miss a single kick the rest of the year, basically. After they did that. So
it's worked. It's worked once already. So why not try to do it again? So I think that one is on Jeremy O'Day a little bit by not doing it. But maybe, hey, this is Corey Mace's team, and this is maybe Corey Mace saying.
I can also see the side of respect of saying, okay, no, we're going to let this. He's our guy. We're going to let him work through that, and that may give him confidence as well.
Right.
That's a plausible theory. It's not necessarily the one I would have gone with. But there's certainly nothing wrong with that thought either.
No, but the problem is again, if he poops his pants in Toronto, it's going to take a lot to bench him for Labor Day, right? Yeah. Like he's your guy. Not having him at Labor Day, to me, is a bit of a slap for a veteran, no matter how bad he's struggling. And then if he struggles again on Labor Day, then you're bringing somebody into the most hostile environment you will see this year into the playoffs in the Banjo Bowl. So it's kind of between a rock and a hard place right now. So ideally he figures it out on Thursday night against Toronto and kind of gets back on track. Because again, he's a good guy. He's a likable guy. You like to see guys like that do well.
Yeah. Now here's the thing. As much as, yes, he missed 4 kicks and that ultimately, in sort of the simplest forms, cost them the football game.
Yeah.
There were some other big picture things that happened that could have been... could have negated some of those misses, or meant that literally Brett Lauther would not have tried to kick as many field goals as he did on Friday night. I think the most egregious of things, well, number one, which is like a mistake that happens, it's whatever. There was the obvious second down drop that Sean Bain had over the middle. It was a fine throw. It hit him right in the hands, and he just straight up dropped it.
Yeah.
Sean Bain Jr. makes that catch 99 times out of 100, and he makes that catch. The Riders pick up a first down. That drive continues from there on. Who knows what happens? But of course, that drop was a bad drop because it stopped the drive. 2, a bad drop because it led to a Brett Lauther field goal. And 3, a bad drop because it led to the return touchdown. So that
real butterfly effect moment there.
That one catch happens. It could have been very possible the Riders go on to win that game. Now, there isn't much else to say about that beyond catch the ball. Number 2,
right? And it's not like he's developed a case of the dropsy, so we're not too worried yet.
No, but perhaps the most egregious sort of you had control over this moment. What happened a couple of times was Corey Mace, for some reason, deciding to forego a couple of relatively easy sneaks on 3rd and 1. Now, I know this team has not been historically good at this recently, no matter who the coach is, for whatever reason. It is something that plagues this organization. That does not mean you stop doing it because you're suddenly scared you're not going to make it.
Yes.
And it was the very first field goal attempt of the game. It was a 3rd and 1. They didn't go for it. And then Lauther missed a kick, and it was 1-0.
Yes.
That one right there, there was absolutely, it was even, I believe TSN had it at 3rd and inches. I didn't actually even see, how close it really was, but there was absolutely no reason not to go for that, especially that early in the game when you still had at least 45 minutes to make it up, and more not even. But it's just it was flabbergasting.
Yes,
it was frustrating, and it just left you wondering where his confidence is at really with the offense if you're not willing to go for it on 2 very obvious 3rd and 1 goes. It's not like. And the other one he gave up as well. It's not like they were at their 20-yard line or something. Like their own. They were deep in plus territory. There was absolutely no reason to go for it. Personally, if it was 5 yards or less, I would have gone for it in either situation. So,
well, especially with how good the defense is.
Mm-hmm.
Like talk to any defensive guy when they go for it on a 3rd down, on a 4th down. Defensive guys are like, yeah, you're showing not only trust in the offense, but you're showing trust in the defense, right? Like, Lauther was struggling. I hate taking the points on the opening drive.
Yeah.
Like, I'm very much go for the throat on the opening drive. Like, again, unless, if you're in that kind of gray area, maybe you want to kick, maybe there's wind, but I'm very much an advocate of you've scripted this out, you've got plays you've run, you've got plays you've walked through. This is your best chance to score is right here, and you're putting your best foot forward. Follow through on that and have the confidence in everybody, right? So, and I get it. 3rd down stops are becoming a little bit more common here in the CFL, but go for it, right? Especially that first one. We were listening to the incredible work again of fully biased here, as I have been on this podcast for years, because of the respect I have from working with Dave Thomas, but Dave Thomas and Luke Mullender were so good that game. Like they are every game. Like I've yet to hear a bad one, but they were perfect in terms of, not being company men. I think it was either Dave or Luke was surprised they didn't go for it there. They were surprised they didn't go for it a couple times. And they both did such a good job of, you got a bunch of guys together for a fantasy football draft. You're kind of passively listening to hear the excitement rise in Dave's voice, to turn up the radio and listen and pay attention, to have Luke break down the moment like he knew we were just joining in. Masterclass. So as I get off on that aside, but what was not a masterclass, I'm with you. Like, go for it. If you don't trust your offense to get less than a yard, like, what are you doing here? Like, that means you need to go back to the drawing board and draw something else up. Maybe you put a fullback under center and just let the fullback do the thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Hamilton does. It's working out pretty well for them.
Well, that's
at least in terms of short yardage conversion. Maybe not anything else, but
right. And that's the thing that blows me away is that, like, and this has always come down to it, as you look at it, essentially when you're running your short yardage plays, having your quarterback on the field is taking away a blocker someplace else, right? Yeah, everybody knows you're going to run it anyways. You're not really, unless you're Chris Streveler, even though Winnipeg hasn't done a lot of that this year, you're not really threatening, that you are going to pass or anything like that, which I would love to see the Riders start doing that with Shea Patterson, because I think Shea Patterson could be that guy, but I digress.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're getting to the point of questions about whether Shea Patterson is a short yardage back. I mean, he's lost that job previously.
Right.
And there seems to be issues with it. Again, that was the issue with the one field goal attempt where they were in short yardage when they kept Trevor Harris out there to try and draw the offside. And it's like, no. Oh, that wasn't even a field goal. Yeah. And then they took the penalty to go back 5 yards, and the kick was missed. And it's like, no one's going to believe that Trevor Harris is going to sneak that football. Now, in that scenario, because no one was expecting Trevor Harris to sneak that football, they definitely should have had Trevor Harris sneak that football. Like, if Tom Brady can sneak a football, I'm pretty sure Trevor Harris can do it at least once. But anyway.
Well, and Tom Brady was one of the best of all time at it.
Yeah.
Like, Tom Brady had a ridiculous conversion rate on fourth and short when he was in the NFL. But remember when they had Nick Marshall doing it?
Yeah.
Like, to me, it just makes all the sense in the world. Just give it to somebody else. Like, you're not going to pass there anyways.
Maybe let's try Jack Cohen at it. Maybe it's a thing that he's, maybe it's a way to get him on the field touching the football, right?
Right. And again, this comes down to me, like, I like Corey Mace as a coach, but there's been a trend this year of decisions like this. Now, again, this is Corey Mace's first time as a head coach, right?
Yep.
He's been a defensive player. He's been a defensive coordinator. He's been a defensive coach.
It takes time for defensive coaches to kind of figure out the aggression on offense a little bit sometimes, for sure.
100%. And that's all this is. I still think Corey Mace is going to go on and have a long and very good coaching career, but it is something that either Mark Mueller's got to be in his ear a little bit more, saying, Corey, go for it. And who knows? Maybe he is. I don't know. Or it's something that Corey's just got to start going, okay, like, especially with a struggling kicker. To me, right now with Lauther and his, I'm going for an every 3rd and 2 and plus territory. If I'm over center,
I would anyway, but yeah.
Right. I mean, as if you ever watched a game of you and I play NCAA football, you and I are going for it on every 4th down no matter what. But I really think, especially now, this is the time to get aggressive and put Lauther in a position where he's just kicking nothing but 20-yard chip shots for the next little bit, right? So this has been a trend with Mace. It's something we see with defensive coaches moving to be the head coach, and something I hope he learns from, because I think as the season goes on, especially with what a mess the standings are quickly becoming, you're going to need every point you can get, because my goodness, this has gone from, okay, BC Montreal, we all know what's happening, to, okay, so Montreal's really good, Hamilton's really bad, and outside of that, what the hell do we know? Yeah,
I mean, I'm pretty confident that Ottawa's pretty good, but beyond that, yeah.
Right?
Who knows right now?
I mean, BC's look like crap. Winnipeg suddenly looks good again. Like, Collaros had probably his best game of the year against BC. Like, it's all just craziness.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely is. And what's funny is, I think, as we get into sort of the bigger picture now, oddly enough, that tie last week kind of works in their advantage in some way.
Right.
Because basically now, barring another tie this season, their season series with everyone is completely irrelevant.
Yes.
All they have to do now is go out there and win football games, because they are not going to be able to tie this. They can tie a season series with someone, but it's either going to be a 1-point differential one way or the other now. So in a way, and we've seen this in the past, sometimes getting that tie sort of takes the pressure off of some situations a little bit, and all they really have to do is worry about and going out there winning football games. And I think, there's a lot of negatives. We talked about the bad side of the game. There was some good side of that game as well. I believe if they had played pretty much anyone else that night, besides the Montreal Alouettes, they would have won that game with relative ease. They played a very good game against a very good team who just took advantage of all of the situations put before them, as you would expect a championship team to do.
Right. And as somebody who was listening on the radio, I meant to ask you this, and I meant to bring this up in the preamble so I had time to prepare, but what was the biggest sign for you that they could have gone Death Star mode?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, you just got the sense, like, watching especially the offense, it just worked on a very different level with Trevor Harris than it did Shea Patterson.
Right.
And so what that comes down to is...
in your piece.
Yeah, there was just very much a quickness to the offense that you did not see under Shea Patterson. It's not just that Trevor Harris gets the ball out fast. Obviously, he gets the ball out fast. We all know that.
Yeah.
But then everything around it operates more confidently, more quickly. And, I mean, he went 31 for 38. I mean, he had... or 39, whatever. He had 8 incompletions all game. The defense, quite frankly, smothered Davis Alexander. He had some... he got away with a few things. He got some luck in some different situations. Some weird things happen at different times. So I think against any other team that doesn't have that championship pedigree right now, I'm pretty confident the Riders go on to win that game pretty easily. And frankly, a couple other different things happened. They could have easily won that game very easily against the Montreal Alouettes. So
yeah, 100%. Like, watching it back, I watched it back at like double speed while my brain was still not functioning between. So I saw the same thing as you, just crisp, right? Like they, not that they looked jointed with Shea Patterson, but it's Trevor Harris there as you expect it to be, but it's almost weird, like, because he's been hurt so much, it's like we're not used to seeing it. The guy, he's been one of the best in the CFL, basically since he came into the league.
Yeah, and I mean that's just the thing. He's been so hurt that we haven't been able to see it. Especially, we haven't really been able to see it at full speed with, an offensive coordinator who's frankly using the pieces to the best of their ability around him.
Right.
So it will be fun to watch how this sort of evolves and see how the team plays. And I think defensively they were smothering. I mean they were all over them all game. If it wasn't for Amari Henderson, they might have won that game as well because he pretty much gifted the Alouettes 10 points in the first half. There was a lot of good in that game as well. I mean, Roland Milligan just continues to be a beast all over the field. Special teams tackles again. The sign that people know he's a good DB now is I think they maybe threw one ball at him.
Are we like Milligan's Marsh now? Can we call it that?
Maybe.
You get stuck in Milligan's Marsh and you're never seeing it's the ball at all. But you're right. That was one thing too that Dave and Luke kept talking about was how good Milligan was and how good a lot of it was. And it's funny, like, and maybe it's just fans are looking at things a different way, but it seem like even though they have had some tough losses lately, it doesn't seem like anybody's hitting the panic button. It's like, okay, this is a team that's still building, and now thanks to the wackiness of the start of the season, they're first in the West, and they've basically been given this runway to build, and now they just keep getting better as the season goes on. So it's going to be really interesting to see from here on out, especially with our friend Derek Taylor, play-by-play voice of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, pointing out they've got one of the easiest schedules heading forward for the rest of the year.
Yeah, they have the third easiest schedule, just behind Calgary and Winnipeg, apparently based on win percentage, and the Riders play Calgary twice out of that, who I believe is a team that could fall behind quickly in the West if they don't sort of start to figure it out. Because if you look at the big picture, I think the Riders, are, they are who they are. Their record, despite sort of the bump in the road recently, their record is probably about where we thought it would be at this point. I think
100%. Yep.
We all kind of thought they were in that 8 to 10 win range, so that's pretty much what they're on pace to do. So they pretty much are where they are. I don't think we expected BC to fall off quite so bad so quickly.
Oh my goodness.
That's kind of what's thrown everything into chaos. But I mean, if you look at it, the Riders are still pretty good. We expect BC to get their stuff together. Winnipeg is trending the right direction. Edmonton is trending the right direction, and Calgary's just kind of been stuck in the mud all year. So if they don't figure something out there, I mean, I think they're the team that this could get away from them quickly if they're not careful.
No, I would agree. And watching their games, just like, you talked about watching Saskatchewan and saying they would have beat anybody else that given night. Watching Calgary lately, I haven't really gotten the feel like, okay, these guys are a sleeping giant. These guys could wake up, right? It just, they haven't looked that good. It's not like a team like Winnipeg where, although the offense still has questions, they're the only team under 200 points given up this year, right?
Yeah.
So again, it comes down to, we know Montreal's truly good, Hamilton's truly bad, and getting worse on defense. I know we don't want to get into it. That's all I'm going to say about it. But you've kind of got those two extremes. And then, like, again, this strikes me as 2011. And to me, if you're playing competitive football till the end of the year, you're going to have a chance to do something good.
Yeah, and it'll also be interesting, I think, in the East to follow. I think Montreal's pretty much got the thing on lockdown. Ottawa's in a pretty good spot to make a playoff spot. But what's going to happen?
Drew Brown's coming back for them.
Yeah, Drew Brown's coming back now. But the real big question is what's going to happen to Toronto. And that's
right. And you sent me an interesting tweet right before we recorded.
Yeah, and Darius Pickett, who's now in Ottawa, talking about the QB they cut, and it was sort of a if you know sort of thing. Sounds like the guy is well liked and is pretty good, Byron Scott. And I don't know. There was the tweet from Matthew Shinetti today about some players talking off the record about how they're going to be keeping a close eye on Chad Kelly, and they're not sure if they really trust him and believe him, quite frankly.
Well, how can you?
Yeah, and so it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. The Riders are going to get sort of the first look into that window on Thursday night when they play at BMO Field. If you're a Rider fan, you obviously hope he has a Nathan Worklight performance in his first game back in the CFL this season. But they're a team that he could. And, I mean, to his credit, Ryan Dinwiddie said that kind of gave him some pause, but he still named Chad Kelly the starter, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, bigger picture with Chad Kelly. I mean, frankly, no one believes anything he said in his media availability.
Oh, of course not.
It's a horrible situation. I don't think he should be playing yet. The guy's clearly shown no remorse whatsoever through any public statements we've seen to this point.
Or his social media, what he's been posting, his Instagram lives.
That includes everything. But that's neither here nor there at this point. I guess the league made its decision, so be it. But it feels like, to me, reading between the lines and sort of getting sort of a feel of the air, which way is the wind blowing in Toronto right now, I'm like, I don't know if the locker room is fully on board with this guy coming back in here just yet. So that could also get messy in a hurry.
Well, and it's so vital. You look at Saskatchewan, you've taken essentially the same core, you've given them a leader like Corey Mace, and what it's turned around. So this is something I never in my life thought I would say on this podcast, but I have to give full credit to my mother-in-law on calling this one. Mm-hmm. She was in Toronto. Her brother, who had on the old pod, Chris Elkovich, longtime Toronto Star writer, covered the Argos for many, many years, right? Mm-hmm. So she flew to Toronto to visit him, and this was during Chad Kelly's MOP season, before anything really came out about him. She came back from Toronto. This was like mid-season. She's like, I hate him. I'm like, what? Like, why do you hate Chad Kelly? She's like, he's arrogant. He was cruel to everybody, because she was sitting right behind the Argos bench. She's like, didn't like him whatsoever. I'm like, what do you know? He clearly is the CFL's new golden boy, Bonnie Bohe. Nope. Full credit to the mother-in-law on that one. She called it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's easy to sit here and say the guy has to get second chances, but I mean, this guy's on his third or fourth chance at this point.
Right.
There's been more than enough in his past to suggest that if this was a guy who was going to change, he would have by now. So
right. Had he gone away, and I would be making the argument here, because I'm a big believer in second chances, even the things he's been accused of and assumingly found guilty of, although it was settled out of court.
But I mean, there was all the stuff in college and the NFL as well too. Like, this is not the guy's first run-in with being a piece of shit.
No, exactly. And and
like,
that's
he was so bad that Dabo Sweeney had enough of him. Like, come on.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Well, and two, like, he showed no remorse. Like, for him to come out and say, I've learned from my actions, that's bullshit. Like, we've all seen the Instagram lives. We've all seen you come on. We've all seen you, like, quote tweet your own teammates. And I don't think it's a surprise that guys had no problem leaving Toronto last year, and it's a black mark on a lot of people in that organization, that was going the right way. Like, I think they would have been better served just, again, jettisoning him to the sun and let somebody else take a run at him. Let him go away for a year. Let Hamilton bring him in next year so he can destroy that locker room, right? Like, they weren't bad with Cameron Dukes and Nick Arbuckle. Were they great? No. But again, you're playing in a division where you've got Montreal, who is great, and Ottawa, who's very good, with a very good culture in that organization. So I think they will rue the day that they let Chad Kelly come back, and because he's shown what a piece of shit he is. I really hope that next time we're talking power rankings, we're like, yeah, Montreal's 1 and Toronto is 9.
I don't know if I'll go that far. They could, I don't think there's a scenario where they're worse than Hamilton.
But could you imagine? I know Hamilton's given up 334 points this year, which I'm just looking at the standings right now. Holy shit, that is terrible. But I'm just hoping, for somebody's sake, that Chad Kelly gets his comeuppance.
Yes, well, of course, we all hope that. So, I mean, the last time we saw Chad Kelly,
that would come at the expense of Chris Jones making Hamilton good. So, like, really, the ultimate rock and maybe Calgary will just figure it out enough to keep them both out of the playoffs. Let's go Stamps.
That would be a fine scenario, I suppose. But I mean, last time we saw Chad Kelly, yeah, he threw 6 interceptions. So maybe we'll see it again.